Okay, well, it is noon, and I just wanted to start out by saying thank you so much for joining us today. This afternoon, we're going to be looking at digital estate planning. A couple things before we get started. If you're not very familiar with Zoom, there is a chat function that you can access down at the bottom of your screen. I have it set so you can message the host at any time. So if anybody has questions throughout this, please feel free to ask in the chat. I'm also going to be recording this talk, and we'll send out a link to it when it's available, probably early next week. And we'll go ahead and get started. Just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Katlin Seagraves. I work at Central Library for Tulsa City-County Library as a digital literacy associate. So I teach technology classes. This is a class that I've taught several times now over the last few years, and it's always one that gets requested to get time and time again. So hopefully there's some helpful information for you today. One thing I'd like to say at the start is I am not a lawyer. All of this research was done through other libraries who have taught similar classes. I've kind of scoured legislature to look at current bills in place, and we'll kind of get into some of the laws that are currently available regarding digital assets. And just wanted to start out by saying I'm not a lawyer. If you guys are looking at doing your own digital estate plan, really the best attack is to take some of these resources I share today and take them to your lawyer that you work with for the rest of your estate. All of the resources today are available at this link here. If you guys actually go to this link now, and I'm just going to go to it quickly so you can see what I'm looking at. And if you missed it, it's tinyurl.com/legacy, all caps TCCL. In here, I have a few things. I usually have a handout that I give during this class. It includes a packet with some information. It kind of covers the steps that we're going to be talking about today, and kind of breaks it down into further details and gives you even kind of a worksheet type thing. So if you are looking to do some of this for yourself, take a look at these handouts. They've been very helpful for me when I was putting them together. I also have in here a resources list. These are all the citations that I used throughout my presentation. Some of these websites were very helpful when I was learning a little bit about digital estate planning. And hopefully they're also helpful for you. And then you can also find the slides that I'm going to be presenting from today. So please access this later. There's also a folder with some laws cited, which we'll get into later. But again, thank you for coming, and we'll go ahead and get started. So there's kind of a lot we're going to get through today. I've tried to break it down, and I've seen other people break down digital estate planning into kind of 5 big steps that you can take when you're working on putting together your digital estate plan. We're also going to look at some of the laws that are in place or not in place in Oklahoma, and then some of the federal oversight regarding digital assets. And then there's also a few further learning resources that I'll touch on towards the end. But the first question I like to answer anytime I have one of these talks is, why are we talking about this? So as I'm sure you are all aware, many of you I think are actually my coworkers today, information and the way we store it has changed. Technology is a big part of our daily lives, and we store lots of information across all sorts of mediums. Very few people probably have filing cabinets where they keep all of their tax returns. And if you do, I applaud you. You're way more organized than I am. But the way we save information has changed drastically over the years. One of the big things that got me thinking about this topic, and one of the reasons that I had decided to put together this presentation, is because, we all have family members who we worry about from time to time who are getting up there in age. And for an example, my father takes care of all the financial situation in my parents' household. And I get nervous that if something were to happen to him, my mom wouldn't know how to log into their Cox account or get in to pay their mortgage. So, practical things like making sure your housemates can even log in to pay your bills is an important thing to think about. We also have a lot of personal history that we want to preserve and make available. This could take the form of, family photos or essays that you wrote when you were, that you may write today. I have this picture of me in a bucket hat from 2001 that I want to make sure is available for forever, because it's a very good bucket hat and very quality photo with my red eyes. So, you know, if you have family heirlooms that you have digitally, you want to make sure that they're available. This is a thing that you need to think about. And we're also talking about this because this can be a very stressful topic to think about. You know, death and dying is kind of macabre to think about, but it's an important thing to keep in mind, not only for yourself, but for your loved ones, for your business partners, for your life partners. And thinking about these things now will save you some grief later. So there's kind of 5 big steps with digital estate planning that I'm going to outline for you today. And we're going to go into more detail on these. But again, you might take a look at those handouts. If you have a printer at home, you can print out a copy. If you don't, like I said, there's a worksheet in there, so that may be helpful for some of you. But the first step that I'm going to talk about is step 1, evaluating your assets and accounts. So when thinking about assets and accounts that you want to make available to other people, there's a lot of things to keep in mind. And this is just an example of a couple of assets and accounts that you may want to pass along to loved ones. For example, your Facebook account. You know, many of us use social media accounts. If you wanted somebody to have access to it after you pass, there's some information that they would need, including your password, your email, your username. Another example would be digital photos. So if you've taken some photos of your family or of yourself and you want to make those available, and say you've stored them on a Google Drive, somebody would need your password and username to access that account, or you may have 2-factor authentication set up, so they would need access to a device that you have backed up to your account. There's kind of 2 categories that I split these into. There's digital assets and there's digital accounts. So an example of a digital asset can include things like emails, documents, images, audio, video files. There's some tricky bits in there, like emails. You technically have the rights to your emails, right? But if you have a Google account and you use Gmail, Google also has all of your emails. So while your loved ones may not have rights to your actual email account, maybe you want to make your emails available to them. Digital accounts can include anything that you log into, email accounts, software licenses, like if you pay for things like Adobe Creative Suite, financial management accounts, social media accounts, file sharing accounts. This is just kind of a brief list. I'm sure you could come up with more if you sat down and thought about it for longer. But an important thing to note, not all digital accounts are transferable to other parties. If you've ever set up any sort of account ever, you've probably seen like a huge document that's like terms of agreement that you've never read through, because if you read through every single one of those, you would live your entire life reading through those agreements. So every service will be different. It used to be that Yahoo accounts could not be shared between people. So if you had a Yahoo account and you passed, nobody else could legally own that Yahoo account, which is crazy, but it is what it is. I have not seen a good guide that walks you through different terms and agreements. There's one from 2013, which is like definitely out of date at this point. But if you have questions about that, you can always look at some of the FAQs on different accounts that you keep and see what's what. For personal accounts, this isn't such a big deal, but say you use like Gmail for business, that's definitely something you would want to consider in that case. This was a huge list of things. A question that people could ask is, where do I start? Because it can seem like a lot to have to sit down and list out. There's some ways that you can figure out where all of your assets and accounts are kept. You've got hardware, so if you've got a cell phone, if you have a laptop, if you have a flash drive or a hard drive that you keep stuff on. You've got your cloud storage, which if anybody has a Gmail account, you have a Google Drive. If you have an iPhone, you have an iCloud account. Some of us have Dropbox or keep stuff on Amazon's web services. So you might want to list out some of those things. I use OneDrive at work, so that would be something that you could possibly list if you weren't on like a company account. You have some of your online accounts, and then you have intellectual property. And again, intellectual property could be stored on hardware, or it could be intellectual property that you have with like publishers and stuff, in which case this would be kind of a separate thing. But when you're going through listing out things, think of all the places that you have things stored. So hardware can include anything from flash drives, memory cards. You can have your work laptop, your personal laptop, your computer, your iPad, your cell phone. Again, we all have way too much hardware, probably, or you have more than you think you do. I recently found a box of memory cards when I was packing and moved earlier this year. So just take a look around the house, see what you can find. Your cloud storage, again, you could have one of these, you could have all 6 of these. There's some that I didn't list here. You have cloud storage and you have files on them. And then online accounts can be anything from like social media accounts like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. TikTok is probably something I should add on here. You have bills that you pay monthly. And this can come in the form of like PSO or Cox, but it can also be banking information, credit card login information, your car payment, and kind of listing out all of those things is step 1. Intellectual property can be anything from essays, pictures, artwork, to video and copyrighted stuff. So think about some of the intellectual property you have, and just get that listed out on your spreadsheet when you do that. Some things that you'll want to include in that information or in that spreadsheet would be things like how to log into the account. So username, associated email, password, PINs, answer to security questions. If you've ever logged into your bank and they show you like a picture of an elephant because that's what you set up to be like the image that you know, so you're logging into the right account. Things like that would be something to keep in mind. If anybody uses a password manager for your household, you are steps ahead of the rest of us. And if anybody is interested in learning about password managers, there's some really great guides, and I'll send out a link to one of my favorites in my follow-up email after this class. But password managers can be a really effective way to save some of this information because it does include information about how to log into the account. And you can even set up password managers with your household. So there are some password managers that you can subscribe to that will have, you know, a family account and you have your own set of logins. Your wife has your logins. Your, you know, daughter and cousin, niece, whatever, have their logins. And then you can also have household logins where you can share between users. So this can be a really effective way to do that. Some of us may prefer lower tech options and you want to get a notebook or a spreadsheet and write some of these things out. Some things to keep in mind are your security risks in this. You know, most of us are not in a whole lot of risk to get our information stolen off of our desks at home, but say somebody were to waltz into your house and find a handy notebook with all of your login information to all of your banking accounts, that would be pretty handy for them. So if you do go with a physical route, make sure that you store it somewhere that is locked, like if you have a safe at home. A fireproof safe would be even better. Or you could even store it offline in like a bank box or something. So just something to keep in mind. This process can take several months to list out everything that you have digitally. When I did it for myself, I think I spent like 5 months on it. Every time I actually did a thing on my browser where I logged out of every single account that I keep in my browser. And it forced me every time I use a new service to have to think, what is my password? Do I need to change it? Which you should never repeat passwords. So it's a good thing to do now when you have the time. And do I have this information in my document for my digital estate plan? And then as you cross-check that list and, you know, say you log into every account at least once every 6 months, you'll have gotten all of your accounts logged into. Once you do keep this list together, it's important that you update it regularly. You may have different security practices than somebody else. I know somebody who changes their passwords like once every 4 months on every account they have, in which case they would want to update this list every time they update their passwords, like say every 4 months. If you only update your passwords when you're forced to due to data breaches, like me, you may have to do it less often. But it's important to make sure that this document is something that is updated regularly. Once you've listed out all of your digital assets and accounts, kind of the next big step is to decide what you want done with them. This will differ between resources. say for some things you would like to delete the account. So if you have a Twitter account where you keep all of your 280 character jokes archived for the last 15 years, and you don't want it to be around after you pass, you could ask that somebody delete the account on your behalf. You can also memorialize accounts, and we'll go into this in more detail later. Facebook actually has an option where you can have like a legacy account, and I'll show you how to do that. You could share the account or asset with family members or business partners. So say you've listed, you have 600 digital photos saved in your Google Drive. Upon your passing or the execution of your digital estate plan, I want to make sure that these 600 photos are shared with these family members. Or you could cancel the service. So if you subscribe to Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, a monthly subscription box of some sort, rather than having those charges keep popping up on your credit card, after you pass, you can go ahead and have your digital executor cancel those services. I said the word digital executor a little too early. So a digital executor is somebody who executes your will or your digital estate plan. So if anybody here has a will that you use now or that you've put together previously, you have named some sort of executor for your will who will go through and make sure that the things listed in your will are executed upon your passing. A digital estate plan also has an executor. They're a digital executor. When you're picking a digital executor, there's some things that you'll want to keep in mind. You'll want to make sure they're very organized and highly detail oriented. If you have put together some of these lists or these plans, and especially as you get into them further and start putting together more things, you'll notice that they can get pretty lengthy. And you have to be pretty specific with what you want done. So you want to make sure it's somebody who's not going to kind of scrape by and not do what you asked. You also need to make sure that the person is committed to following your plan, because this can be quite time intensive to take care of these things on your behalf. And you also want to make sure they're very comfortable with technology and the internet. If you have your sister assigned as your digital executor, but she has trouble logging into her Gmail, she may not be the best fit for executing your digital estate plan. And then finally, the last thing to pay attention to is make sure it's somebody that's patient, and again, just very committed to carrying out your wishes as you've written in your will. So just a few things to keep in mind. You also may have multiple digital executors. If you are a small business owner, you handle all of the finances for your household, or you are the family historian and have all of your family photos and stuff, you may assign different digital executors based on the different properties that you're working with. So if you have a business partner, they would be an obvious person to help you with that. If you have a spouse or a partner, they would be the person to help you, distribute and make sure that the financial stuff is put together. So you may even decide to break your digital estate plan into separate documents and have somebody in charge of those documents. There are some laws in place about digital executors, and we will get to those. They're a little confusing and not really existent at this point, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Step 4, once you have listed all of your assets, decide what you want to do with them, who's doing what, you need to think about where you are storing this information or securing this information. There's a few different places that you can store this sort of sensitive information. It could be with an attorney, it could be with an online storage service of some sort, or it could be a locked file cabinet or safe. One thing that I probably should have mentioned earlier is that a digital estate plan is actually separate from your will. So if you have a will, they're not actually usually that long if you don't have a whole lot of assets. The digital estate plan is a separate living document that is stored separately from a will and updated much more often than a regular will is. So this is kind of two separate things. Your will, you'll have a paragraph saying, I have a digital estate plan, it's a thing. And then the digital estate plan would be a separate document that you're working out of. When you're storing it, just make sure that it's somewhere secure and that people can't gain access to it easily. Oh, I did put a slide in here. Good on me for that. So like I said, you're not going to be storing your passwords, usernames, etc. in your will. This would be a separate thing that you're working off of. If you do store it with your attorney, just make sure that it's something you're updating the copy of regularly. And if you have an attorney, I'm sure it's somebody that you have vetted and that you trust. So yeah, do that. You can also encrypt that sort of information. So if you were to put this like onto a flash drive or something, you could encrypt the flash drive, which would be a thing that I would suggest doing. Just make sure that somebody has the password for the encryption. It's the only thing to keep in mind for that. Online storage services are definitely a thing that exists in the world that you could use. This actually was a thing that kind of blew up like, I want to say like 2011 or 12 from when I was looking at on all of these websites. There are services that exist that you can actually store this information with, you know, login information, digital assets, and your estate plan, and they will execute it on your behalf at your passing. There's a whole list here on the Digital Beyond of resources and services that do this sort of thing. I don't really want to suggest any of them to you because I haven't done a whole lot of research on it. I don't know much about them. If you do utilize a service, just make sure it's a service that's been around for a while. Look at their Better Business Bureau website, or look them up on, you know, Better Business Bureau and see what kind of ratings they get. And make sure you pay attention to any updates that they may send out. If you're storing this information with an online service and they fold and they send you like an email, don't ignore it. Just make sure you're keeping on top of it. Most of these things are subscription based. So you pay like a, you know, monthly or annual fee of some sort to utilize the service. Which if you are using one of these services, I would probably recommend that it's one that you're paying a subscription for because they're probably better supported and have better security. But again, I have no idea. There's a list at thedigitalbeyond.com. And then if you do store your information in a locked cabinet or safe, make sure it's fireproof. And if you have a higher risk profile, say you're a state spy or, you know, often have your home broken into and somebody, your kids have your safe information and try to get into it all the time, maybe consider somewhere off-site and not in your home. For the most part, most of us are pretty low risk in this regard. Oh, hold on. I clicked something weird on the screen. I need to fix it. What have I done? Okay, sorry. Okay. So just make sure it's fireproof. You might consider a bank box. I think those are still a thing that people use sometimes. I have never had one. It seems like a very adult thing to have, but they exist. And then step 5 of our digital estate plan is to make it legal. So as I said earlier, this is a separate, your digital estate plan is a separate document, separate from your will. It's something you update fairly often. But you have to write it into your will saying that you have a digital estate plan. So this is some sample language that was put together by the Digital Beyond that I really liked. Again, if you have a lawyer, they probably have language in place that they use at their firm. Or if you have a lawyer, they don't know a whole lot about this. Hopefully this is something that you can help take to them. But as you can see from these paragraphs, it's pretty simple language. I have prepared a memorandum with instructions concerning my digital assets and their access, handling, distribution, and disposition. I direct my executor and beneficiaries to follow my instructions concerning my digital assets. Pretty straightforward, pretty short, just a couple sentences. And then here's one: digital assets. My executor shall have the power to access, handle, distribute, and dispose of my digital assets. So pretty straightforward language, just a few sentences. and pretty easy to write in there once you have your digital estate plan in place. So if you're already working with a lawyer, hopefully this is a helpful thing that you can take to them. And again, they may already have language like this prepared that they've used with other clients. So we've kind of outlined those 5 big steps. The next thing I would like to talk about briefly is about some of the digital asset laws that exist. It's kind of the Wild West. There's not a whole lot of uniformity between states. If you were going to be handling assets for somebody who lives in another state or country, best of luck to you in your endeavors. I'm mostly going to focus on what I have been able to find at the federal level and then here at Oklahoma. So back in 2015, the revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Access Act was approved by the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws, which sounds like a whole lot of nonsense. There are groups that meet at a national level to discuss best practices for laws that they would like to see passed at the state levels. The National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws met back in 2015 and put together the revised Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital FADA Act. I don't know how to pronounce that. It's fine. It's a long word. I'm going to read it to you, and I'm sorry that I'm reading word for word, but I found it helpful to read out loud. It allows fiduciaries to manage digital property like computer files, web domains, and virtual currency, but restricts a fiduciary's access to electronic communications such as email, text messages, and social media accounts unless the original user consented in a will, trust, power of attorney, or other record. So what this meant to me is, and from all of the interpretations that I've seen it online, this act allows people to have access, or you can specify access to your computer files, web domains, virtual currency, right? But unless specifically stated in a will, trust, power of attorney, or other record, somebody cannot access emails, text messages, and social media accounts. So this is not actually a law. This was just an act that was passed as suggested law for states to go through and pass at their state level. And as far as I can tell, there aren't a whole lot of other things in place at the federal level that protect digital assets, because most of these things are done at the state level. And trust law is very confusing. So I don't know if anybody got more confused by this slide. I'm sorry if that's the case, but this is what we have. Specifically looking at Oklahoma, we have a couple of things. So HB 2800 was something that was passed in 2010 and signed by the governor in April of 2010. And it specifically is an act relating to the probate procedure authorizing an executor or administrator to have control of certain social networking, microblogging, or email accounts of the deceased, providing, so I didn't need to include that information, but essentially this law as it was passed meant that in Oklahoma, it was after this was passed in 2010, that you could assign somebody as an executor for certain social networking sites and assets or accounts. Microblogging, I think this is probably when like Tumblr was a thing or Medium was a thing, which they still are. So this was a thing that was passed in 2010. And as far as I can tell, from the research I've done and talking to some lawyers in town, other than this law that was passed in 2010, there are no other state laws that have been passed regarding digital assets or accounts, which is wild to me. It is now 2020. A couple of things that have been attempted to go through, or that have attempted to go through legislation in Oklahoma that have not passed the introduction phase. So if you're familiar with the legislative process, somebody has to write the proposal, they submit it to the floor. It's it's introduced, and then it's usually assigned to a subcommittee on either the House or the Senate. That subcommittee will take a look at it, try to work it to something that will get passed on the floor, and then it goes to the floor where it's either voted into place or it's sent back to committee for revisions. And then at that point, it has to go to the other place and then go through that same process. So it's kind of a lengthy process to get laws into place. And from that, HB 2800, or no, sorry, the federal movement in 2015, a couple of legislators here in Oklahoma have tried to get that Uniform Fiduciary Access to Digital Assets Act that we talked about earlier passed in Oklahoma. So in 2016, it was introduced to the Senate. It died on the floor. And then again in 2018, it was introduced into Senate and it died on the floor. I have done some searches to see if something similar was presented in recent sessions, and I have not seen that anybody has reintroduced this act. The last person to write there to submit it was Senator Duggar. He is currently on the Finance Committee, I believe. He's on a few committees with Oklahoma, with Oklahoma legislature. But if this is something that you would like to see, put into place in Oklahoma, I would definitely recommend you reach out to your legislators when it is the season to do this sort of thing. Unfortunately, we are past that season for the year. But as this is something that would go through the Finance Committee, if it is something you're passionate about, as we all are passionate about some laws and not so much about others, you could actually contact, members of the Finance Committee, during the next, proposal session and ask that something like this be presented, because it certainly has had interest from, Oklahoma legislators in the past few years, and it has federal support as enacted in that 2015, Uniform Act. So all that is to say, there's not a whole lot of legal backing for these things at the state level at this time. But for the most part, most people probably don't have very litigious families. Like, if somebody in your family were to pass and you had a digital estate plan in place, there's not much chance of, kind of the regular citizen of having some sort of like lawsuit pursued by other family members or business partners, in which case, this whole legal side of it wouldn't be such a big deal. But if you were in a situation where somebody would try to, say that this is not an actual document that could be followed legally, there isn't a whole lot of protection at the state level. So just something to keep in mind. And I have reached out to Senator Duggar to see if he is going to be introducing anything like this in the coming years. Did not get a response, but one day, if I do, I'm going to send out an email to everybody and say, this is how you can contact your legislators if you need it. So we've talked about the digital estate planning bit. Now I wanted to touch very briefly on online legacies. Online legacies is a thing that I actually got from a Jessamine West article in a journal that I read monthly. It's called Computers and Libraries. And she talked about the way that kind of our identities are in this article, and I definitely suggest you go read it. You can access it for free with your library card at tulsalibrary.org. It's one of my cited resources in our citations page. She talked about how the information that is available about us that we have put out is available on the internet, and the way it stays there, the way it doesn't stay there, and talked about some different steps that you could take to kind of make sure that your online legacy, either when you're living or you've passed, you can have a bit more control over it. So if anybody has an interest in this, I definitely recommend reading this article. She linked to some very helpful resources, depending on what type of account you're looking at. And she also talked about a really cool resource called the Wayback Machine. This is one that I actually use pretty often. It's if you go to a website called archive.org, this is run by the Internet Archive. It's a nonprofit resource that I donate to regularly because I think it's so cool. But they have a thing called the Wayback Machine, where you can actually see things that are on the internet, but throughout history. So for example, I'm going to go to tulsalibrary.org, and you can see in 2020, the most recent snapshot they have is from April 21st, which is just, a week ago. They also have snapshots from even further back. I think the earliest one is 1998, December 12th, 1998. I can go see what the Tulsa Library website looked like in 1998, which is wild to me. I think our website today looks much better than it did. And at the time of the snapshot, it was visitor 17,530, which is kind of adorable. But things that you can do on here, some of these links will work, some won't. But you can actually see kind of a snapshot of history of the internet with this resource. Now, if you're not just like a super internet nerd like I am, this probably isn't all that interesting. But if you have previously had, like blogs or websites that you contributed to or created, this is actually a way that you could go through and access some of that information. The way this works is it sends out crawlers on the web and gets snapshots of different websites. If you had kind of an obscure blog from, the early 90s, you probably are not going to find it on here. But say you were a contributor to a popular online magazine or of some sort, you might be able to find some of your old work with the Wayback Machine. So they also have kind of a cool thing that you can add on to your browser. And this is kind of a pivot from what I usually do in here, but I can go to Wikipedia and I'm going to look at Tulsa Library. And find an article from 2013, let's see here. So here's a website from Tulsa City-County Library website from 2009. If I click on this link here, you'll notice that it can't be reached. It's kind of a dead link. But usually the Wayback Machine would pop up and say, well, it's not going to do it. So usually with the Wayback Machine, if it's a website that's available in the Wayback Machine, they'll actually send a pop-up and say, would you like to see the last version of this website? And it'll take you to the last available version of that website that it has access to. So it's kind of a cool way to fix dead links as you're browsing the internet. And then another thing that you can do with it is actually see old versions of websites, especially if some of their information has changed. So like the CDC website changed pretty drastically after the last election. So that's something that you could actually go and see the CDC website under what it looked like under the last administration, which is kind of an interesting thing to see how you can just see the history of the internet. So if you have some personal information that you're interested in accessing, that's a cool tool. And then, as far as online legacies go, literally every service is different. When you're listing out your different accounts, you'll find that different accounts have different types of things that you can do with them upon your passing. Facebook has a really cool thing that they set up a few years ago called a legacy contact. So a legacy contact, essentially, upon your passing, you'll have a legacy contact who can decide what goes on with your account, and it would be something that you would have set ahead of time. So a legacy contact could get in and download your photos, delete things for you, but they can also memorialize your account. So you would go from having an account that said like Katlin Seagraves to remembering Katlin Seagraves. And it could be kind of like a memorial Facebook for you. This is something that did not exist before my grandmother passed away. And now we have just kind of I'm sorry, Grandma, to say it, but like a creepy Facebook account that pops up in my feed occasionally. That's my grandmother. And it kind of makes me very sad every time I see it. So if you want to prevent that sort of thing for your family, or if you want to make it something a little more curated, this is a thing you can do. But you just go into manage account, and then you can assign your legacy contact. It does have to be somebody who has a Facebook account. It can't just be like rando person number 9. And you can actually assign a couple of different legacy contacts. So I have picked I picked 2 of my favorite siblings as my legacy contacts. And then I told the rest of my siblings that I, didn't pick them. And then you can express what you want done with that. And then you can also request an account deletion. So after Facebook is informed of your passing, they can delete your contact, or they can delete your account for you. And then your legacy contact will also have the opportunity to download your information if that was what you wanted from them, where they could download like all of your status posts, or all of the comments that you have on your things. So if you're a writer, or one of my friends, Johanna, has like really awesome updates that she does every day that are like snapshots of Tulsa. That's something that like you can almost like put into a book and put on a library shelf. It's so charming. So just a thing that is available to you that Facebook has put in place. But lots of other accounts have done similar things to this. It's just kind of your job to go through and see if you can figure it out. Now, I've got a few tips for everybody as you're getting started on this journey, either for yourself or for your loved ones. The tip number 1 that I have for you is that you don't need to keep everything. If you've ever gotten one of those notices on your laptop that you're about to run out of storage, as I did this last week, you may go through your computer and decide that you don't need 30 copies of the same document that you've downloaded multiple times. When you're going through and putting this together, don't put every little thing that you own on here. Just put the stuff that you want to be saved and shared with your loved ones or your business partners or whatever. You don't need to keep everything. Tip number 2 is to make sure that you inventory your assets and accounts and update them often. Talked about this earlier, but you should be updating this document every 6 months is a good goal, or as needed. So if you are part of a big data breach and you've had to update lots of different accounts for whatever reason, like maybe you were targeted by somebody who got your information for an account. If you've done a lot of work to update your passwords, you might as well go ahead and grab that document and update them there too. Whatever you do, just make sure that you do it regularly. If you keep an online calendar to-do list for yourself, just go ahead and add like a notification to pop up and remind you to check on it every now and again. But do what works for you. And, if it doesn't work for you, then don't do it. Another thing that would be good to keep in mind when you're naming your files that you have stored and you're passing along, look at your file naming and make sure it's something that makes sense. If it's your 2019 tax return, you could name it 2019 tax return. You don't have to keep it as that long string of numbers that it probably downloaded from whatever your accountant sent you. So name your files. If anybody has questions about archiving practices, I have a whole presentation that I've linked to later in this presentation. Another thing that would be good to do is to describe your assets. So if you've gone through and decided that you want to share your 600 family photos that you've gone through and saved, the way that you store information about those files is important. My mom gave me giant boxes of family photos. I did not know half of the people in them. So they kind of meant nothing to me. So if it's, if it's like family history or like genealogy research you've done, go ahead and put all of the information that you know about it into that file. You can either add it to the metadata of the file, which again, I have a whole presentation, an hour-long presentation that I can link to on this process. Or it could be something like a spreadsheet that you keep where you have the file name and then you keep information about that file in that spreadsheet. Or it could be that you've listed out the file name on your piece of paper and then you've written out what's in the photo or whatever. Do whatever works best for you, but describing your assets is very helpful later on. Another thing that I had a customer recommended to me in the first time I taught this class was to save some sort of guide to your desktop or your storage device. So if you were saving your digital estate plan onto a flash drive or onto a laptop or an external hard drive, you may have like a README file that is just like a Word document or a Notepad document that says, hey, welcome to my digital estate plan. I hope you have fun here. Thanks so much for all your hard work. Here's what you're looking at. You can find most of my stuff in this folder here. Just kind of make it like a friendly, like, welcome document. And that can be helpful for your executor when they're looking at what can be kind of a confusing document to look at if you have no context for it. So just something to keep in mind. And then tip number 6, if you are passing along files to people, make sure that it is in formats that are easy to access and on devices that are easy to access. So if you have all of your super important documents saved onto a floppy disk that you want shared with your family, they may have some trouble getting onto that floppy disk. So go ahead and, put it on a digital storage device of some sort that is not obsolete. Or if you have files, make sure they are in file formats that can be easily opened on different computers. I have a lot of files that are saved as PSDs on my computer because I have Photoshop on my computer. If I were to pass that along to somebody that doesn't have Photoshop, they can't access that file easily. So make sure you're converting stuff to like a PDF, which is a pretty, universally used format. If it's a photo, make sure it's a JPEG or a TIFF and not some weird random file type that maybe people can't access. So just something to keep in mind. And then tip number 7, don't get frustrated. This can be kind of a sad thing to think about, but it can also be incredibly empowering to think about. And making sure that, if you're an organized person and you want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row, getting this duck in the row may be particularly satisfying. But it can be a frustrating process because it's just such a long process. So try to break it down into little bits. When I was putting together my plan, like I said, I took several months to put it together. And once it was done, and I only have to go through and update it occasionally. So once you get over it, or once you finish it, it's a lot easier to update than it is to make the thing. So don't get frustrated. A couple of further learning resources I have for you. We have a service called Book a Librarian. It's usually an in-person service that we offer at all of our library locations. But if you would like a digital Book a Librarian, I am offering those. So if you ever want to get together one-on-one and ask questions, or if you're working on this and you need a little more guidance, you can call, leave a voicemail, or email anytime, and I'm happy to work with you on that. Or we can schedule a Zoom meeting to kind of work on this a little further, or help you better understand it. Another service that is currently unavailable while the library is closed is our digital literacy lab. In our lab, we have scanners, converters for all different types of formats. So if you are working on updating some of your more obsolete technology files that are on obsolete technology, we have the resources for it, and hopefully they will be available to the public again soon. But again, just shoot me an email or call and leave a voicemail anytime you have questions. There's a couple workshops I wanted to mention. I talked a little bit about digital archiving. 2 weeks ago, on one of these webinars, I talked about best practices or some personal practices for digital archiving. I have made the recording available on our YouTube channel, the Tulsa Library YouTube channel. There's a link here. Or you can find the slides for that presentation at tinyurl.com/archivedll. And it has some good information about how to name files, how to organize files, how to add metadata to your files if that's something you're interested in. So you might take a look at that. And then this is a class, our Tech Talk series is a thing that I'm going to be doing weekly for the foreseeable future. So we've covered privacy, we've covered digital archiving, and today digital estate planning. Next week on Friday at noon, we're going to be talking about your library at home. So some different digital resources that you can access at the library that you may not know about unless you're like a super user. So we're going to look at some of my favorite databases, as well as like some cool things that you can do in our catalog that you may not know about. May 15th, we're having a data scientist come in and talk about how they look at data and how they build models using data to predict things or look at kind of the course of things over, you know, something that a lot of people have an interest in right now is pandemic data. So kind of the process for that. It's a grad student who's working on their master's degree right now, and she's presented it a couple times, and I thought that you all might find it interesting. So you can find our Tech Talk on our website at tulsalibrary.org, where you can see our different classes as they come up. I also, in your handouts, which if you missed earlier is available at this link down here at the bottom, Legacy TCCL. I have a list of citations that I found to be really helpful, and especially the Digital Beyond is a website that I really liked. It kind of looks like their page was looking a little weird today, so I don't know if they ran an update or something. But they have some really good information on this website, especially under legal resources. I think this is where I pulled those example paragraphs from. And they also have a book, Your Digital Afterlife, that had some really good information, but it was written 9 years ago. So it's pretty out of date at this point, but it was kind of like the only thing that I have seen written on the topic in a book format. So I like the website. You can check out information about laws in your state. And I like the website on a normal day. It looks weird today. And again, here's a link. But thank you so much for everybody for coming today. If you have questions, please feel free to ask in the chat. I can be around for a few minutes longer. Or if you have questions, I'm happy to look into it and get back to you. And I'm going to be sending out an email early next week with a link to this talk, as well as a couple resources that we talked about today. So thanks for coming.